Welcome friends. In today's video, we'll hear a story, wrapped in mystery. Imagine, if you will, a man, dedicated, heroic, who served with valor. Now imagine him placed in a situation where individuals are treated without honor and dignity. We'll follow one such individual in today's story. Darkness envelops hallways in a manner where, as with all things in the realm of r/NoSleep, things are never as they seem. Before we begin, please be sure to leave us a like, share the video with a friend, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you never miss a story. I'd like to thank our current subscribers. This video is made possible by viewers like you. Now, enjoyed the story. I was a security guard for an eccentric millionaire and his property. What I found while responding to an emergency one night has scarred me forever. I rented a cheap room which became my new home when I got back from Afghanistan. I slept till 1 o'clock in the afternoon most days after staying up all night. I searched online for a job and found an opening posted by the CEO of a pharmaceutical corporation. It was for the role of a security officer and personal bodyguard. The boss's name was Gregory Basile. He was wealthy, reclusive, and needed an armed night watchman. He preferred someone with military experience to keep the lookout on his place. I found Basile's official website and sent an email expressing interest. Within half a day, Basile wrote back. I went in for the interview shortly after. Basile was thin and in his mid-40s. He took me into a mini bungalow on the outskirts of his property. He conducted the interview next to a marble swimming pool. Your resume shows you're a bouncer, he said. I did a background check, Mr. Crew. You were in the Marine Corps not too long ago. Ever had a gun pulled on you? I've seen more guns than I can count overseas. I am looking for bravery. Do you have a lot of experience in surveillance? I was a sniper, I said. He hired me. I figured out that Basile was a natural hermit. I did not even see my employer most days. One time he visited me at my post, and I asked him how he spent most of his hours. Taxidermy, Basile said as he exhaled a large cloud of smoke and took a sip from his coffee cup. Crows are my specialty. Displaying them is a meditative act to me. Why crows? I asked. Crows have one eye on the spiritual realm, one eye on the real, and are a sign of affirmative creation. They are never a negative thing to see. We had many conversations like that one. Basile also told me of his obsession with films and how he owned a media production company. He yearned to rival the great Hollywood studio empires one day. He sighed and stated his hobby of taxidermy kept him busy enough. The job was effortless. I spent my shifts in a shack reading while taking in the lakefront view. After my 90-day probationary period ended, he handed me the key to his house and gave me one rule. Basile said I could not enter his mansion unless he called me with news of an emergency. Basile's house was old. It used to belong to someone related to the man who invented the sewing machine. For years it was on the market after its original owner died. Everybody who lived in the estate left it behind except for Basile. I did not always enjoy the night shift. I would always hear a screaming voice from the top floor, and a light in the window of the attic would flicker on and off. I did not know why, and Mr. Basile did not know either when I questioned him about it later the next day. I asked him if I was the only employee who worked for him on the property. As it turns out, I was the only one on his payroll. I asked him if he had any night terrors, and he got ready to fire me on the spot. I apologized and told him I did not mean to pry and that it was a regular occurrence for me. I reassured him my question did not come from a place of judgment. I mused on how it would explain the loud yelling which always happened past midnight. During another time while working the graveyard shift, I stepped out of the shack to get some fresh air. I looked up and saw yellow lights flicker on and off from the topmost room through the haze of tobacco vapor. A loud scream followed and did not stop. I sprinted through the front field. It had broken down statues and pathways aligned with candles encased in blue glass. I reached one of the gates clogged with vines. I grabbed a hold of one and began climbing it. I approached a northern barricade made of black and twisted metal. It was frost-laden to the touch, but with leather gloves on I got a solid grip. I placed my feet into the crevices of the ancient mythological designs carved into the wall. I heaved myself up 10 feet of it before looking over the other side. I inhaled the scent of maplewood and watered grass lifted by the breeze. I pulled myself upwards next to a large oak tree. For a quick second, there appeared to be movement on one of the top floors. I focused on it and saw it was a mechanical co-track on wheels. Their garments fluttered in the wind. I chose not to risk climbing the varied sets of bastions and arching rooftops. There was a long concrete path which led to a weathered fountain with cracked alabaster. Statues of gargoyles circled it. I attempted to scale the backside of the wall, placing one foot over the ledge with steady balance. The landing of the second foot on the other side of the wall when I reached it was not as good. My lower body dangled. I kicked the wall in an attempt to find some kind of bearing without any luck. I fell off. Something solid stopped my fall mid-center of my back and threw me upwards again. I turned over to see that I had landed in a tree. A thick but pliable branch softened my fall. I hung there for a minute before working up the nerve to let go. I landed on the dewy green turf 8 feet below. I ducked behind a row of trimmed hedges and followed it. I went to the front door made from ivory stone. I tried to use the master key to open it without success. I found a window leading down to a basement. I pushed it to see if the latch on the other side was keeping it in place. And my suspicion proved correct. Walking over a few feet to an area with a dead miniature garden, I picked up a rock and began smashing at the pane. When it shattered, I swept away some of the sharp flakes and crawled into the basement. I looked around before reaching for the flashlight at my side in its holder on my belt. I illuminated the area. I thought I saw a human face. Upon closer inspection I learned it was a mannequin. With each step, all I could see were the wax figurines, male and female. Their mouths were agape or their eyes closed, some disfigured or melted or painted. Illustrations of demonic faces covered their expressions. One of the figurines was metallic with black lines resembling human veins. Another line of them had different types of grey stocking caps. The hats covered up single braids which flowed downwards. Some had clown faces with elongated red lipstick and purplish eyeliner. Hacked and melted dummy parts were on the floor. I searched the quarter for any and every secret I could. There were no closets. I felt the walls looking for a doorknob. I walked up a spiral staircase towards the next room. That chamber was especially small, and the floor sapphire-colored. There was a scattered miscellany of strange devices. There were telescopes facing the windows. Pendulum clocks built out of fossil hung on crooked shelves. Geometrical military compasses hung nailed to the wall. One segment of the area was nothing but thin strings. I pulled on one out of sheer curiosity, which led to several of the other twines bending. A cascade of puppets fell from the ceiling. A jester, king, witch, archangel, grim reaper, and hangman. They all flew down from the top, their paper outlines emphasized in the bright gloss of the room. Their crowns, brooms, death masks, and nooses swayed against each other as they landed into one another midair. One of the mantelpieces contained a line of palm-sized 100 Years War-type cannons. The idea of using a lit match to see if they shot pellets seemed like a good one. Before I decided otherwise, the overstuffed space was pressing in on me. I used a door beside a globe to enter the next corridor. This one was more bizarre than the last. For a second I felt like jumping out the window to get out of the infernal place. I began investigating what the contents in the room actually meant. It was a film set. There were masks of all kinds. Marine knives were in the darkness of that clearance. I touched the edge of one to see if it was real or fake, and I proved them to be authentic. I looked at one of the corners and found a half-empty tin canister of a burnt-looking film reel. There was a projector next to it. Across from that equipment, there was a tank full of what I hoped was nothing more than artificial blood. I pressed my hand against the glass. I pulled out my phone and took a picture of this thing and noticed a button at the bottom of the large glass edifice. A velvet polluted stream of fluid began flowing out. At first it splashed my legs. I soon slipped and fell. I slid backwards, carried by a river of crimson. The fake blood drifted me against the other edge of the room. I smashed through the cathedral-like window and plummeted downwards. I landed on the right side of my body, hoping there was no fracture. I stood and felt little more than some discomfort. I had suffered worse injuries in boot camp. I was in the main foyer of the house, and marveled at how elegant it was. It was Victorian yet machine-like. There were 2 flights of black rock steps leading up to a new set of bedrooms. There was a giant mural between the 2 staircases. It was a portrait of a female's corpse stenciled out on the ground in clean white chalk. On either side of her outline were childlike drawings of trees. I smelled my hand to see if the red fluid was blood. The iron copper stench was not there, but instead one of corn syrup and food dye. I walked up the flight of steps to the left and entered another chamber. It was a computer room. A tuxedo was in a glass case against the right wall. It was discarded movie memorabilia from one of the former actors on the set. The place across the way had nothing in it except one golden wall with a sunset painted on it. The carpet was a midnight blue. There was a row of candles along a foreign rug like it was a spiritual shrine. I looked around and saw one fake scroll which was blank and held together with a clean-looking red ribbon. I closed the doorway and moved on. There were 3 other chambers accessible from the main hall that I had fallen into. One was a dark room for photography, although no pictures were in it. The place glowed red. The second was a room with pictures of classic cars from the 40s and 50s. 2 portraits hung in the center. One was of Elvis Presley, the second was of the serial killer Charlie Starkweather. The third room was the most normal. 2 bookshelves held nothing but seedy, sensationalist titles. I used the emergency master key to gain access to entryways leading up to the top floor. I discovered that it worked on most of the interior passageways. I passed rows of stuffed Saharan animals. A smell of carbolic acid and spoiled meat greeted me. On the second and third floor, I began noticing a trend in the taxidermy collection. Crows were all around. Their eyes were missing, their beaks warped, and their feathers blocked. I was soon in the attic. There was a set of eyes staring at me, and a door with the silhouette of a black skull painted on it. I opened the door and saw a circle of dark candles. The next foyer had stuffed wolves, foxes, lions, and leopards. I ran up the limestone staircase leading to the second level. I found the entrance on the ceiling, pulled it down and entered the attic. It was dusty and lined with columns of boxes. The place was in the shape of a triangle. Near the pointed end was another chamber closed off with an old oak door. Next to it was a skull, and 2 bright amber dots in the place where the eyes should have been. I thought they were insects of some kind, fireflies or glowworms. I got closer to them and observed how they were not moving. I heard the scream again. I busted down the door with a kick. In front of me was a circle of black candles. Half of them were lit. What I saw on the other side makes me weep whenever I remember it. It was a sergeant I had served with. Though he and I were not close or in the same unit, I recognized and knew of his reputation. His name was James Mantle. He was a prolific hunter of insurgents in the Alishan district of the Lagan province. He was dead and had been for a long while. Someone mounted Mantle on the wall. His arms were folded across his chest in the same sacred way bodies are in open casket ceremonies. My mind began racing. Someone had to have desecrated his body in bringing him there. I scoured the room. I moved some of the old clutter. I found paper bags with decapitated heads cleaned of blood. There was also a functioning ceiling light pull fashioned from flesh. Crushed and shriveled roses were on the ground to mask the scent. I found a journal bound in skin. The writing was calligraphic. I sat in the dark and shined my pen light on its pages. It was a grimoire. The pages evolved into a host of different spellcasting instructions. The lengthiest enchantment was for everlasting bravery. The requirements were 4 things: a full moon, a circle of black candles, a chalice of water with added salt, and 2 spoonfuls of vervain. Stir the contents with a wedge of wood, the directions instructed, and pour the concoction over the cadaver of a brave warrior. The writer was Basile. He had a sick delusion of performing feats of necromancy meant to chase away his own cowardice. The spell required equal parts the lifelessness and preservation of someone valiant. There was a page describing how Basile had attained the body of the man from Calderon Cemetery. He bribed the groundskeeper with enough money to make the sentinels look the other way. Basile stole the valor of departed veterans. Anger coursed through me. I stood up and stuffed the journal on the inside pocket of my jacket, turning around to look at my friend once more. Then, I heard the shuffling of feet down the hallway to my right. I drew my gun and scaled the wall after walking outside. Before coming to another threshold, I gazed around the corner while making as little noise as possible, and I saw Basile. The old man had a row of dead crows on a silvery metallic board. Next to him was a voluminous countertop. There was a row of pin pushers, bone cutters, scissor forceps, and combination tools. Many black feathers were at his feet. I aimed the gun at him while approaching. Basile saw me and his eyes widened. He knocked his counter over, chucking a knife at me. The blade missed and clattered to the ground. I squeezed the trigger, and the bullet hit Basile in the right shoulder. He grunted in pain, hit the earth, and soon regained balance. He ran and I tackled him. I looked into his eyes. "Please no," he said. "No, no, no, no." I put the barrel to his forehead and squeezed the trigger. I was on a leaf-strewn mound overlooking Calderon Cemetery. I was in full camouflage. I sat between two species of Zelkova trees underneath the branches. I held my M16A4 rifle with its Picatinny rail and foregrip. I peered through its scope at the sentinel and groundskeeper. They were the ones who had allowed Basile to disrespect the dead for the sake of profit and necromancy. The muzzle compensator managed the recoil and allowed for a faster follow-on shot. Both of the graveyard workers fell to the ground. I slung the strap of the rifle over my back, went to my truck, and retrieved Mantle. I balanced him over my shoulder and carried him to his original place of burial. I shoveled the already soft soil to the side. I finally came across the Paul Lane over the hexagonal coffin. I removed the cloth. The exterior shell was already damaged, but I treated it as if it were new. I placed my friend in the coffin and proceeded to rebury. On the drive back to my old apartment, I called the police. I gave them the address of the mansion and told the 9.1.1 operator about the location of the estate and what was contained in its topmost parts. It will be a while before they find Basile and the condition he is in, but they will. When they get me, so be it. I will never regret what I did. Semper Fidelis. End. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let us know what you thought in the comments below. Can you relate to the man in our story? Do you believe his actions were justified? What would you do if you saw something similar? As always, please be sure to smash that like button, share the video with a friend, and ring the bell so you never miss a story. Until next time, sleep well friends, and thank you for tuning in.